Caleb had 2 hours and 37 minutes to find help before the man who hurt him discovered he was gone. That's how long it took for Victor Maddox to do his Saturday morning rounds, checking on the children locked in 3 different houses, making sure none of them had found the courage to run. But Caleb wasn't running. He was hunting. For 19 months, 7 children had endured what the state called structured care. What happened in the next 18 hours would bring 250 Hells Angels to West Virginia and prove that sometimes the scariest-looking person is exactly the one who will fight for you. This is Caleb and Ray's story, and the ending will show you that you don't need eyes to see what's wrong. You just need the courage to act. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel. And in the comments, let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community around the world. Now, let's begin Caleb's story. Are you the man who rode with the angels? The question came from a child's voice, shaking but precise. Each word sounded rehearsed, like it had been practiced in the dark. Raymond Calder, Ray to anyone who'd known him before blindness took his world, sat on the concrete barrier outside the Sunoco station on Route 33, white cane across his knees, thermos of coffee going cold in his hands. The sun hadn't cleared the ridge yet. Fog rolled off the Greenbrier River in thick sheets, and frost turned every surface slick and dangerous. Ray's eyes didn't focus on the boy. They couldn't. Retinitis pigmentosa had stolen his central vision 14 months ago, leaving only shadows and light at the edges. But Ray's hearing was sharp enough to catch the slap-step rhythm approaching from 30 feet away. Slap-step, slap-step, slap-step. One shoe with a sole coming loose, hitting pavement in an uneven beat. Ray set the thermos down carefully, his hands reading the concrete for balance. "That shoe needs fixing," he said, voice low and controlled like every word had been weighed first. The slap-step stopped. 10 feet away, maybe less. Ray turned his head toward the sound. "I can hear the sole flapping. Come closer. I don't bite." Silence. Then footsteps again. Slower now. Cautious. Closer. "Are you—" The voice tried again. Small. Hoarse. Like it had been crying recently but was done with tears now. "Are you the man who rode with the angels?" Ray's hand tightened on the cane. In Hadley Creek, West Virginia, population 4,800, people didn't ask that question unless they had a reason. And children definitely didn't. "Who told you that?" Ray asked, keeping his voice steady, non-threatening. A pause. 3 seconds. 4. 5. "The man who hurts me," the boy whispered. "He's scared of you." Ray went completely still. Not frozen. Controlled. The way a soldier goes still when intel comes through that changes the entire operation. Behind him, the Sunoco's fluorescent sign buzzed in the morning quiet. A diesel pump hummed on the far side of the lot. Somewhere down Route 33, a jake brake echoed as a truck downshifted into the valley. Ray's cane tapped once against the concrete. Tap. Then he reached out one hand, palm up, and waited. "Show me where it hurts," he said. 5 words, from a man who couldn't see, asking to be shown. For a long moment, nothing. Then fabric rustled as a sleeve was pulled back. A small, cold hand placed a thin forearm into Ray's palm. Ray's fingers moved slowly, carefully, reading what his eyes couldn't. His thumb found the first scar, circular, raised, about the size of a quarter. Then another, and another. 7 circular scars. some old and flat, some still healing, pink and tender. Burn marks. Ray's jaw tightened. His hand began to shake. Not from cold, from rage held on a leash. "His name is Victor Maddox," the boy said, voice stronger now, like saying the name out loud gave it less power. "He runs Pinecrest Group Home. He burns us when we talk to anyone outside." Ray's fingers stayed on the scars, gentle but firm, like he was memorizing each one through touch. "There's more," the boy continued, and now the words came faster, like a dam breaking. "There's a room in the basement, concrete floor, no window. The light turns off at 9. He locks kids in there for days. There used to be a boy named Liam. Liam isn't there anymore. Maddox said he fell downstairs." Ray's other hand found the boy's shoulder, steady, grounding. "Keep talking," Ray said. The boy's breath hitched. "I heard you were here. I walked 11 miles in the dark because Maddox told someone on the phone. He said, 'If the blind vet talks, we'll handle him like we handled Torres.' He took Liam's life. He's going to do the same to me. And there's a girl named Maya. Nobody knows where she is." For 3 seconds, Ray didn't move, didn't speak. Then his hand closed gently around the boy's forearm, covering the scars like a shield. "I can't see your face," Ray said quietly. "But I can hear what truth sounds like, and I can still make a phone call." He paused, and his voice dropped lower, steadier, carrying the weight of a promise that would not break. "You walked 11 miles. I'm going to make sure you never have to run again." Now you might be thinking you know what happens next. A blind man finds a terrified child, and his first move is to call the police, right? That's the story you'd expect. But this isn't that story. Because Ray had already called the police. 7 weeks ago, after he'd heard something that made his blood run cold, it was 11:30 p.m. on a January night. Ray had been in his van, a 2003 Ford Econoline with a dented rear bumper and West Virginia plates, parked in this same Sunoco lot where he'd been sleeping for 9 months. The van smelled like motor oil and instant coffee, and the kind of loneliness that settles into fabric. A truck had pulled up 30 feet away. 2 men talking, voices low but clear in the winter quiet. Ray couldn't see them, but a blind man's hearing is extraordinary. The first voice was familiar. He'd heard it before at the gas station, loud and confident, the kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. "The Whitfield kid is a problem," the voice said. "He keeps trying to talk to people." A pause, engine idling. Then a second voice, younger, smoother. "Same thing Torres did before he fell." Ray's hands had frozen on the steering wheel. "Polk says one more complaint, and the state might actually send someone," the first voice continued. "Need to move the kid." "Where?" the younger voice asked. "Same place as the Rawlings girl?" "Maybe. Or maybe we do what we did with Torres. Stairs are easy to explain." Laughter. Cold. Casual. "Dad says he'll sign whatever you need. Tell your father I appreciate it. And tell him the next check's coming Thursday." The truck had pulled away. Ray had sat in the dark, hands shaking, trying to process what he'd just heard. The next morning, he'd gone to the Hadley Creek Police Department, walked in with his white cane, tapping his way to the front desk, and told Officer Pruitt exactly what he'd heard. Pruitt had been polite, sympathetic even. He'd taken notes. "We'll look into it, Mr. Calder," he'd said, "but without a recording, without names, it's hard to move forward. You understand?" Ray had understood perfectly. He'd understood that "we'll look into it" meant "we're not going to do anything." He'd understood that in a town like Hadley Creek, where everybody knew everybody, crossing the people who ran things was a good way to stop being employed. He'd understood that without proof, Without witnesses, a blind homeless man's testimony meant exactly nothing. So Ray had done what he'd always done when the system failed. He'd waited. He'd listened. And now, 7 weeks later, the proof had walked 11 miles in the dark to find him. Caleb James Whitfield was 9 years old, 4'2" and 52 pounds, 11 pounds underweight for his age, though no doctor had weighed him in over a year. His brown hoodie was 2 sizes too large, sleeves pulled down to cover the scars on both forearms. Drawstring missing. His sneakers were held together with a rubber band where the sole had separated at the toe. He had hazel eyes that stayed too wide, never blinking at a normal rate. Hypervigilant. Scanning for threats. His left collarbone had healed wrong after it was broken 19 months ago. The bone sat crooked under his skin, creating a visible bump that showed through his shirt when the hoodie slipped. Ray couldn't see any of this, but he could feel the cold radiating from the boy's skin. He could hear the shallow, too fast breathing. He could sense the way Caleb stood, shoulders hunched, one hand always in his hoodie pocket, protecting his forearms from being grabbed. "What's your name?" Ray asked. "Caleb." "Caleb, I'm Ray." He kept his hand on the boy's shoulder. Steady. "How long since you ate?" A pause. "Yesterday morning." "Oatmeal. Half a packet." Ray's hand moved to his jacket pocket and pulled out a protein bar, the kind the VA clinic sometimes gave him when he went in for checkups. He pressed it into Caleb's hand. "Eat slow," Ray said. "Your stomach's going to want a rush, but that'll make you sick. Small bites." Caleb tore the wrapper with shaking fingers. The first bite was careful, the second one faster. Ray waited until the boy had swallowed 3 bites before he spoke again. "You said Maddox is scared of me," Ray said. "Why?" Caleb chewed, thinking. "I heard him on the phone. He said you used to ride with the Angels. He said if you ever talked to anyone about what you heard, they'd handle it." Ray's mouth went dry. So Maddox knew Ray had been at the gas station that night, knew he'd heard the conversation, and that meant Maddox had been watching, waiting to see if Ray would become a problem. "He knows you're here?" Ray asked carefully. "No." Caleb's voice dropped to a whisper. "I left at 4 this morning. He was passed out. I have until 7 when he does rounds." Ray pulled his phone from his pocket, a basic flip phone with oversized buttons he could navigate by touch, and checked the time by feel. The phone had a tactile clock function, raised dots he could read. 6:23 a.m. 1 hour and 37 minutes. "Caleb," Ray said, voice calm but firm. "I'm going to make a call, but I need you to stay right here with me. Don't move. Don't run. Understand?" Caleb's breathing hitched. "Are you calling the police?" "No." "Then who?" Ray's thumb found the first contact in his phone, a number he hadn't dialed in 18 years, a number he'd sworn he'd never use again because using it meant admitting he couldn't handle his own problems. "Someone who'll actually help," Ray said. He pressed dial. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, a voice answered. Deep, rough, familiar in a way that made Ray's chest tighten. "Yeah?" "Iron," Ray said quietly. "It's Ray Calder." Silence on the other end. Not empty silence. Shocked silence. "Brother," Iron finally said, and his voice carried 18 years of questions and 0 judgment. "Where have you been?" Ray swallowed hard. "Hadley Creek, Route 33, Sunoco. I need every brother within 50 miles here. Now." A pause. Then, "What's going on?" Ray looked down toward where he knew Caleb was standing, even though he couldn't see the boy's face. There's a child here who walked 11 miles to find me because the system that's supposed to protect him is the same one hurting him. And the man who's doing it knows I heard him plan to take another kid's life. We're not waiting for the cops to take their time on this one. 3 seconds of silence. Then Iron's voice came back, hard and certain. Say no more. We're coming. The line went dead. Ray slipped the phone back into his pocket and turned his face toward Caleb. Help's coming, he said. And when it gets here, you're going to tell them everything you just told me, every detail, every name, everything. Caleb's voice was small. What if they don't believe me? Ray's hand found the boy's shoulder again. They'll believe you, he said, because I'm going to be standing right next to you when you say it. And because the men coming don't ask you to prove you're hurt before they help. Marcus Iron Delgado was 57 years old, president of the Appalachian chapter of the Hells Angels, and a man who'd ridden with Ray Calder for 9 years before Ray had disappeared to care for his dying wife. When Ray's call came through, Iron was in his garage in Charleston, 73 miles from Hadley Creek, rebuilding a carburetor on a 1987 shovelhead. His hands were black with grease. His coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago. The call ended, and Iron stood there for 5 seconds, wrench still in hand, processing. Ray Calder. After 18 years of silence, asking for help. Iron didn't hesitate. He grabbed his phone and opened the group chat labeled Appalachian Full Patch. 23 names. All brothers who'd earned their cuts through loyalty, not posturing. He typed one message. Mobilization. Route 33 Sunoco, Hadley Creek. Child in danger. System involved. Ray Calder requesting support. Wheels up in 30. Spread the word to Kanawha Valley and Blue Ridge chapters. This is not a request. He hit send. Then he dialed the first of 5 numbers he needed. Hawk. It's Iron. We're rolling to Hadley Creek. Need your detective brain on this one. Foster care situation, possibly worse. I'm in, Hawk said immediately. No questions. Iron called Doc next. Combat medic, bring your kit. We've got a child who's been hurt. On my way. Preacher. You still got those CPS contacts from when you were a school counselor? Yeah. What do you need? Everything you can pull on Pinecrest Group Home in Hadley Creek. And come ready to interview a scared kid gently. Understood. Signal. Tech specialist. Bring your documentation gear. We're building a case, not just a rescue. Copy. Old Iron. Need the elder statesman on this one. Ray's back. A long pause. Ray called you? Yeah? Then it's real. I'll be there. Within 20 minutes, Iron's phone was lighting up with confirmation messages from across 3 chapters. By 6:50 a.m., 23 motorcycles were staged in a lot off I-64, engines idling, waiting for the rest. By 7:15 a.m., the Kanawha Valley chapter had joined, 46 more bikes. By 7:40 a.m., Blue Ridge rolled in from Virginia, 31 bikes, 100 men, and the calls kept coming. At 7:52 a.m., Iron stood at the head of the formation and looked at the brothers gathered in disciplined rows, leather vests bearing the same patch, chrome gleaming in the morning light. Here's what we know, Iron said, voice carrying across the lot without shouting. Ray Calder, some of you rode with him, all of you know his name, is in Hadley Creek with a 9-year-old boy who walked 11 miles to find him. The boy says he's being hurt in state foster care. Says the man running the group home has taken another child's life, and is planning to do it again. Says the system that's supposed to protect kids is protecting the abuser instead. He paused, letting that sink in. Ray hasn't asked for help in 18 years. Now he's asking. We're not going in loud. We're not going in violent. We're going in visible, disciplined, and we're making sure this kid doesn't get disappeared while paperwork gets filed. Old Iron stepped forward. Gray beard, 64 years old, the man who'd founded this chapter in 1987. Some of you don't know Ray, he said, voice gravelly and certain. But I do. If he called, it's because every other option failed. And if a child walked 11 miles in the dark to find a blind man, it's because that child has no one else. We're going to be that someone else. Every head nodded. All in favor? Iron asked. For a moment, nothing. Just the ticking of cooling engines and the distant sound of highway traffic. Then every single hand went up. Not a moment's hesitation. Not a single dissenting voice. 100 men voting unanimously to help a child they'd never met. Mount up, Iron said. The formation pulled out in disciplined rows, tight, smooth, practiced from years of riding together. The rumble started low, distant, like thunder on the horizon. Then it grew into a roar that shook windows and set off car alarms as they passed through small towns on Route 60. 100 engines roaring in unison, a deafening, beautiful thunder rolling toward Hadley Creek. And in the Sunoco parking lot on Route 33, Ray Calder sat on the concrete barrier with a terrified child beside him, listening to the distant sound growing louder. That's them, Ray said quietly. Caleb's eyes went wide. That's all of them? That's the beginning, Ray said. By the time this is over, there'll be more. If you believe a child deserves protection no matter how powerless they seem, comment, stand with Caleb, and subscribe, because what happens next will prove that justice doesn't need a badge. It just needs people who refuse to look away. At 8:17 a.m., the rumble became visible. Earl Briggs, the 67-year-old attendant who'd worked the Sunoco counter for 19 years, looked up from his register and saw them coming down Route 33 like a storm rolling off the mountain. The formation was tight, disciplined. 4 bikes across, row after row after row. They didn't scatter. They didn't race. They moved like a military convoy, synchronized, controlled, purposeful. Earl's hands went still on the lottery ticket dispenser. By 8:23 a.m., 100 motorcycles filled the Sunoco lot and the overflow across the street. They parked in perfect rows, chrome gleaming under the morning sun, engines cutting off almost in unison. The sudden silence after all that noise felt heavy, expectant. 100 men in black leather vests stood beside their bikes, not moving, not shouting, simply present. And in the middle of it all, Ray Calder sat on the concrete barrier with a small boy beside him, white cane across his knees, waiting. Now, I know what you might be imagining. 100 Hell's Angels rolling into a small West Virginia town, and you're picturing threats, chaos, fists ready to fly. Everyone in Hadley Creek thought the same thing. Earl reached for the phone behind the counter. Patricia Vance, driving past on her way to the bakery, pulled over and locked her doors. 2 mothers walking their kids to the elementary school 3 blocks away turned and went the other direction. But here's what actually happened. Iron walked across the lot toward Ray, his boots crunching on gravel, and when he reached the barrier, he didn't raise his voice. He knelt. "Brother," Iron said quietly. "It's good to hear your voice." Ray's hand found Iron's shoulder, reading his presence through touch. "Didn't think I'd ever make this call." "Glad you did." Iron's gaze shifted to Caleb, who was pressed against Ray's side, small and terrified, and trying not to shake. "You must be Caleb." Caleb nodded, then remembered Ray couldn't see. "Yes, sir." Iron's voice gentled. "You're safe now. You understand? Nobody here is going to hurt you, and nobody's going to let anyone else hurt you either." Caleb's eyes filled, but he didn't cry. He'd learned not to. Behind Iron, the brothers formed a loose perimeter around the gas station. Not threatening, not blocking, just visible. A wall of leather and steel that said very clearly, "We're watching." Hawk stepped forward, a man in his 50s with gray at his temples and eyes that had spent 23 years reading people as a state police detective. He'd retired 2 years ago, but the instincts never left. "Caleb," Hawk said, crouching so he was at eye level, hands visible, non-threatening. "I used to be a detective. I know how to document evidence the right way, the kind that holds up in court. I need you to tell me everything, and I need you to let me take pictures of your injuries. Is that okay?" Caleb looked at Ray. Ray nodded once. "He's good people." Caleb pulled back his sleeves. Hawk's face went very still when he saw the scars. 7 circles, varying stages of healing. He pulled out his phone and photographed each one, close up, with a ruler beside them for scale. Then he opened a voice recording app. "This is Hawk, documenting evidence at Route 33 Sunoco, Hadley Creek, West Virginia, 8:29 a.m., Saturday, March 8th. Subject is Caleb James Whitfield, age 9, resident of Pinecrest Group Home. Caleb, can you tell me who hurt you?" Caleb's voice was quiet but steady. "Victor Maddox. He runs the group home." "How did you get these marks?" "He puts out his cigarette on our arms when we talk to people we're not supposed to talk to." Hawk's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "How many times has this happened to you?" 7 times. The first one was 2 months after I got there." "When was the last time?" 10 days ago. I told the school nurse my collarbone hurt. She asked how it happened. I told her it got broken and nobody took me to the doctor." "What happened after you told the nurse?" "She called CPS. A woman named Denise Polk came. She talked to Maddox in his office for 20 minutes. Then she came and talked to me. She asked if Maddox was nice to me. I said yes, because Maddox was standing in the doorway listening." Hawk nodded slowly. "And after Polk left?" "Maddox locked me in the basement room for 3 days. No food, no light after 9 p.m. When he let me out, he burned my arm again." Hawk stopped the recording. His hands were shaking. Doc moved in next, 48 years old, combat medic who'd served in the Gulf War, now a civilian paramedic with the county. He carried a medical kit and a gentle manner that came from treating wounded soldiers who were too scared to scream. "Caleb, I need to check you over," Doc said. "Make sure you're not hurt anywhere else. Is that all right?" Caleb nodded. Doc worked methodically, checked the collarbone, felt the crooked healing, took photos, checked Caleb's ribs, found bruising, weeks old, fading yellow-green. Took photos, checked his hands, fingernails bitten to the quick, cuticles bleeding. Took photos. When he was done, Doc looked at Iron with an expression that said everything without words. "He needs a hospital," Doc said quietly. "Malnutrition. Possible kidney stress from dehydration. That collarbone should have been set 19 months ago." Iron nodded, after we secure the scene. I don't want him going anywhere alone until we know what we're dealing with." Preacher stepped forward, 59 years old, former school counselor for 20 years, a man who'd spent 2 decades learning how to talk to traumatized kids without re-traumatizing them. He sat on the barrier beside Caleb, not crowding, just present. "Caleb," Preacher said softly, "you mentioned a boy named Liam. Can you tell me about him?" Caleb's voice dropped. "Liam Torres. He was 11. He was there when I got there. He tried to run away twice. The second time, Maddox caught him and locked him in the basement for 5 days." "When did you last see Liam?" 2 years ago, right before I got placed at Pinecrest. Maddox told us Liam fell down the basement stairs. He said it was an accident." Preacher's eyes narrowed. "Did you believe that?" Caleb shook his head. "The basement stairs have a railing, and Liam was careful. He counted steps. He wouldn't just fall." "And the girl you mentioned, Maya?" "Maya Rawlings. She was 8. She was at Pinecrest for 6 months. Then Maddox said she got transferred to a facility in Kentucky. But one of the other kids said he heard Maddox on the phone saying Maya wouldn't be a problem anymore." Preacher recorded every word in a notebook, writing in clean, precise handwriting that would be legible in court. Signal, 31 years old, tech specialist, former IT contractor who now ran digital forensics for insurance fraud cases, was already on his laptop pulling records. "Got Liam Torres in the state database," Signal said, fingers flying. "Death certificate filed April 14th, 2 years ago. Cause of death, blunt force trauma consistent with fall down stairs. Medical examiner flagged inconsistencies in injury pattern." "Flagged to who?" Iron asked. Signal's face darkened. "Family Court, Judge Charles W. Hammond's office." "And?" "Nothing. Report was filed, case closed. No follow-up investigation ordered." Hawk leaned over Signal's shoulder. "Pull the insurance records. If there was a payout, there's a money trail." Signal's fingers moved fast. "Liam Torres, guardian payee, listed as Victor Dean Maddox. Life insurance policy, State Farm. Payout amount, $163,000. The lot went quiet. $163,000 for a child who fell downstairs. "Pull Maya Rawlings," Iron said, voice hard. Signal typed, waited, frowned. "She's not in Kentucky," Signal said slowly. "She's not in any facility database. No school enrollment. No medical records after August 2023. It's like she vanished." Preacher's voice was tight. "Where was she last officially documented?" "Pinecrest Group Home, Hadley Creek. Caseworker, Denise Polk." Iron turned to Hawk. "We need witnesses. People who saw something and didn't say anything. People who can't ignore this anymore." By 9 a.m., the brothers had fanned out across Hadley Creek in pairs, knocking on doors, asking questions, making it very clear that silence was no longer an option. And here's what they found. Witness 1. Patricia Hobbs. Patricia Hobbs, 54, former CPS social worker, lived in a small house on Elm Street with a garden she tended obsessively because it was the only thing she could control anymore. When Hawk and Old Iron knocked on her door, she opened it halfway and said, "I already know why you're here." Her hands shook as she led them to her kitchen table. "I filed 3 reports on Pinecrest," Patricia said, voice brittle. 3 separate incidents over 8 months. May 2023, September 2023, January 2024. "What happened to them?" Hawk asked. "Routed through Denise Polk. She's the senior case manager. Every report I filed went to her desk first." Patricia's eyes filled. "After the 3rd one, I was transferred to Logan County. Reassigned. My supervisor said it was for workload balance, but everyone knew. You don't question Denise Polk's cases and keep your assignment. Did you keep copies? Old Iron asked. Patricia stood, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder. Inside were 3 incident reports, photocopied, dated, signed. Report 1. May 18th, 2023. Observed bruising on minor child, initials CJW, during mandatory home visit. Child stated bruising occurred from falling. Body language indicated fear. Recommend immediate follow-up. Status: unfounded per D. Polk. Report 2. September 3rd, 2023. Anonymous tip received regarding inadequate food provisions at Pinecrest. Unannounced visit conducted. Kitchen cabinets locked. Children appeared underweight. Recommend nutritional assessment. Status: unfounded per D. Polk. Report 3, January 12, 2024. Minor child, initials MR, reported missing from Pinecrest. Maddox claims transfer to out-of-state facility. No transfer paperwork on file. Recommend verification. Status: case closed per D. Polk. Transfer confirmed verbally. Hawk photographed every page. Why didn't you go over Polk's head? He asked, and his tone wasn't accusatory. It was genuinely asking. Patricia's voice broke. I tried. I went to the district supervisor. He told me Polk had been with CPS for 18 years and had an impeccable record. He said I was overreacting to normal foster care challenges. 2 weeks later, I was transferred. She looked at Hawk with red-rimmed eyes. I knew something was wrong. I didn't want to lose my job. I have a mortgage. I have bills. And I told myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe the kids were lying. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But I wasn't wrong, was I? No, ma'am, Old Iron said gently. You weren't wrong. You were just outnumbered. Witness 2. Dr. Nasreen Shah. Dr. Nasreen Shah, 41, emergency room physician at Hadley Creek Medical Center, was in her office reviewing charts when Doc and Preacher found her. When they mentioned Caleb Whitfield, her face went pale. I remember him, she said immediately. November 2024. Came in for a mandatory annual checkup required by the state for foster children. What did you find? Doc asked. Fractured clavicle, healed incorrectly. Multiple contusions in various stages of healing. Severe malnutrition. I flagged it immediately in my report. Documented everything. Took photographs. Filed a mandatory abuse report with CPS. What happened? I got a call from Denise Polk 2 days later. She said the child had been relocated for behavioral reasons, and the case was closed. I asked where he'd been relocated. She said that was confidential. I asked if he'd been seen by another physician. She said yes, and that the new doctor had determined the injuries were consistent with normal childhood activity. Dr. Shah's hands clenched into fists. I checked the transfer database. There was no record of Caleb being transferred. I called back. Polk told me I was interfering with an ongoing case and that further calls would be reported as harassment. Did you keep your documentation? Preacher asked. Everything. She opened a file on her computer. Photos, exam notes, x-rays. I kept it all because something felt wrong. She sent the files to Preacher's encrypted email. I should have pushed harder, she said quietly. But I was told the system was handling it. I wanted to believe that was true. Witness 3. Earl Briggs. Earl, the Sunoco attendant, stood behind his counter with his arms crossed, watching the lot full of motorcycles through the window. When Hawk and Iron walked in, Earl spoke before they could ask. "I saw things," Earl said, voice rough with shame. "Maddox's van pulled up here twice at night over the last 6 months. Late, after midnight. Once in October, once in January." "What did you see?" Iron asked. "Kids in the back, through the window, crying. Maddox yelled at them to shut up. One time a kid tried to open the door from inside. Maddox reached back and grabbed the kid by the hair, slammed the door shut from his seat." "Did you call anyone?" Earl's face crumpled. "No, in this county you don't cross the people who run things. Maddox sponsors the county fundraisers. Judge Hammond's his friend. Denise Polk's been around forever. I'm just a gas station clerk. Who's going to listen to me?" "We're listening now," Hawk said. Earl nodded slowly. "I got something else. Security footage. This place has cameras. I never deleted the old files because the hard drive's big enough. You want to see what I saw?" "Yes." Earl led them to a back room and pulled up footage from January 23rd, 2:17 a.m. The video showed Maddox's van pulling up, showed him getting out, showed him opening the back door and yanking a small figure, child-sized, out roughly. The child stumbled. Maddox grabbed them by the arm and shoved them back inside. The timestamp, the license plate, the van model, all visible. "Copy this," Iron said to Signal, who'd followed them inside. "All of it." Witness 4, Reverend Dale Mitchell. Reverend Dale Mitchell, 72, assistant pastor at Hadley Creek Baptist Church, answered his door with a Bible in hand and guilt written across his face. "I know why you're here," he said quietly. "I saw something I should have reported." He let them inside. 6 months ago, Reverend Mitchell said. Church parking lot. Sunday morning. I saw Victor Maddox disciplining a child. The child had dropped a hymnal. Maddox grabbed the child by the wrist and squeezed. Hard. I could see the child's face go white. I could see the pain. "What did you do?" Preacher asked. "Nothing." The Reverend's voice broke. "I told myself it wasn't my place. That parents, guardians, discipline children differently. That I didn't know the full story. I walked away." He sat down heavily. The child was small, dark hair, thin. "I think it was the boy you're asking about." "Did you tell anyone?" "I told myself I'd mention it to the deacons if I saw it again. But I didn't see it again. And I let it go because speaking up felt uncomfortable, and staying quiet felt safe." Preacher's voice was gentle but firm. "It's not too late to speak up now." Reverend Mitchell nodded. "I'll testify. Whatever you need." By 11 a.m., the case was no longer invisible. Signal had compiled a file that included Hawk's photographic evidence of Caleb's injuries, Doc's medical assessment. Patricia Hobbs' 3 buried CPS reports. Dr. Shaw's hospital documentation from November 2024. Earl's security footage from January 23rd. Reverend Mitchell's eyewitness account. Financial records showing $163,000 insurance payout for Liam Torres. Missing person documentation for Maya Rawlings. And Caleb's testimony recorded in clear audio stating exactly what had happened and who had done it. Iron stood in the Sunoco lot and made a call to someone who couldn't be ignored. "This is Marcus Delgado. I need to speak to the FBI field office in Charleston. I'm reporting child endangerment, financial fraud, and obstruction of justice involving state employees in Hadley Creek." The operator connected him. Within 20 minutes, 2 federal agents were en route. At 11:53 a.m., Victor Maddox was in his driveway at 2214 Persimmon Road, washing his truck. He was humming. Actually humming. Some old country song, off-key and cheerful. He had a sponge in his hand. Soap suds dripped from the hood. He wore cargo shorts and a faded t-shirt that said, "Pine Crest, where kids come first." The same hands that had held a cigarette to a child's skin were now washing a truck like it was a Sunday chore. When 3 police cruisers and 2 unmarked federal vehicles pulled up, Maddox looked up with mild annoyance, like someone had interrupted him during something important. "Can I help you?" he asked. The lead FBI agent stepped forward. "Victor Dean Maddox?" "That's me." "You're under arrest for child endangerment, aggravated assault of a minor, fraud, and obstruction of justice." Maddox's face went blank. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. "This is about that Whitfield kid, isn't it? He ran away this morning. I was about to call it in. Kid's got behavioral issues." "Turn around," the agent said flatly. "Hands behind your back." Maddox's smile faded. "You can't just... I've been doing this for 12 years. I'm a deacon. The agent stepped forward. "You're under arrest." "You have the right to remain silent." They cuffed him right there in the driveway, soap still dripping from his hands, protest dying in his throat as reality finally landed. He looked confused. Genuinely confused, like he couldn't understand how this had happened, how people had finally stopped looking away. At 1:15 p.m., Denise Polk was arrested at her desk at the county CPS office. She tried to delete files when the agents walked in. Signal had already backed them up remotely that morning. At 2:30 p.m., Judge Charles Hammond was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. His son Bradley, employed as Maddox's operations manager for $78,000 a year, was arrested for conspiracy. By 3 p.m., the FBI had executed search warrants on Maddox's home, his office, and his 3 group home facilities. What they found broke the case wide open. In Maddox's home office, a ledger documenting monthly cash payments to Denise Polk, $3,500 per month for 3 years. Total, $126,000. In his file cabinet, life insurance policies on 6 children currently in his care. Each policy worth over $200,000. Each listing Maddox as beneficiary. In his desk drawer, Caleb's handwritten letter to Judge Hammond requesting a new placement, dated November 3, 2024. The letter had never been filed. It had been intercepted and returned to Maddox with a handwritten note from Hammond's office. Handled. No action needed. And in a storage unit rented under Bradley Hammond's name. Medical records for Liam Torres showing healed fractures consistent with repeated physical harm. The autopsy report that had been lost after being flagged by the medical examiner. And a recording device, still functional, that contained a conversation between Maddox and Bradley discussing how to handle the Whitfield problem like they handled Torres. The system hadn't just failed, it had been designed to fail. Because failure was profitable. That evening, as the sun set over Hadley Creek, 250 motorcycles lined the streets around the Hadley Creek family courthouse. Word had spread. 2 more chapters had arrived. They didn't block traffic. They didn't shout. They didn't threaten. They just stood there, visible, watching, making sure the truth didn't get buried again. Inside, Caleb sat in a victim advocate's office with Ray beside him, Doc monitoring his vitals, and Preacher holding his hand. "You're safe," Preacher said quietly. "You did it, Caleb. You walked 11 miles, and you found the right person. And now you're safe." Caleb looked at Ray. Can I hold your cane for a minute?" Ray handed it over without hesitation. Caleb held it across his knees, feeling the weight, the texture, the rhythm it made when Ray used it. Tap, tap, sweep. Tap, tap, sweep. The sound of a man who couldn't see finding his way forward anyway. Outside, the engines were silent. But the presence was loud enough. Justice had been served. But justice wasn't the ending. It was only the beginning. Within 4 hours of Maddox's arrest, Hawk made 3 calls that changed everything. The first was to the emergency family court judge on duty. Not Hammond, who'd been suspended, but Judge Maria Torres from the neighboring county, brought in specifically because she had no ties to Hadley Creek's power structure. "We need an emergency custody order," Hawk said. 9-year-old removed from dangerous placement. Medical evidence, witness testimony, and federal charges all documented. Judge Torres issued the order at 4:17 p.m. The second call was to the State Foster Care Oversight Board. "We have 6 additional children at Pinecrest Group Home who need immediate removal and evaluation." By 6 p.m., all 6 children were in emergency placements with vetted families, each one with a victim advocate assigned. The third call was to a woman Hawk had known for 15 years, a foster parent in Charleston who specialized in trauma cases and had room in her home. "I've got a boy who needs safety more than he needs perfect," Hawk said. "Can you help?" Her answer was immediate. "Bring him to me." But when Hawk relayed this to Caleb, the boy's face went white. I don't want to go somewhere new," Caleb whispered. "I don't know her." Ray's hand found Caleb's shoulder. "You don't have to go anywhere you don't want to go," he said quietly. "Not anymore." Old Iron stepped forward, voice gentle but firm. "What if it's not somewhere new? What if it's somewhere temporary, just until we figure out what you need?" Caleb looked at Ray. "Can I stay with you?" Ray's throat tightened. He lived in a van. He had $43 in his checking account and a VA benefits claim that had been denied twice. He couldn't see well enough to cook safely. He couldn't drive. But before he could explain why that was impossible, Iron spoke. "We'll make it work," Iron said. By Sunday morning, the brothers had done what the system couldn't. Signal coordinated with the VA Advocate's office in Charleston and pulled Ray's lost medical records from a backup server. Turned out they hadn't been lost. They'd been misfiled under the wrong service number for 2 years. With records in hand, the VA benefits claim was refiled as an emergency case. Within 72 hours, Ray's back pay was approved. $127,000 for 14 months of disability benefits that should have been paid all along. Hawk helped Ray open a bank account and deposited the first check. Then he drove Ray to a small rental house on Maple Street. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, heat that worked, and a landlord who'd agreed to accept first month's rent and security deposit immediately. "It's furnished," Hawk said, describing the layout room by room so Ray could map it in his mind. "Kitchen's small but functional. Living room has a couch and a TV. 2 bedrooms. One's got a twin bed, one's got a full. Bathrooms between them." Ray stood in the middle of the living room, white cane tapping the floor, reading the space. Caleb stood in the doorway, still wearing his broken shoe, still too thin, still scared to believe this was real. "Which room do you want?" Ray asked. Caleb blinked. I I get to choose? It's your home too, Ray said. You choose. Caleb walked through both rooms, testing the space like he was waiting for a trap to spring. Finally, he pointed to the smaller room. This one. Why that one? Ray asked. Because it has a window that faces the street, Caleb said quietly. I can see if someone's coming. Ray understood. Caleb needed exits. Caleb needed to see danger before it arrived. That's a good reason, Ray said. Doc showed up that afternoon with groceries. Real groceries, not just survival rations. Oatmeal, yes, because Caleb had asked for it, but also peanut butter, bananas, bread, eggs, chicken, rice, and a rotisserie chicken still warm in its container. Food for the week, Doc said. And here's the important part. He handed Ray a printed sheet in large font and read it aloud. Dietary guidelines for refeeding after malnutrition. Small meals, slow increases, warning signs to watch for. If Caleb gets dizzy, if his heart races, if he feels nauseous, you call me immediately, Doc said. Refeeding syndrome can hit hard. We're going slow and we're doing this right. That first night, Ray made oatmeal. He measured by touch, counted scoops, used the talking thermometer Doc had left to check the water temperature. He couldn't see if it was lumpy or smooth, but Caleb ate it anyway, sitting at the small kitchen table, watching Ray move through the space like he was memorizing a map. It's good, Caleb said quietly. Ray smiled. You're a terrible liar, but I appreciate the effort. Caleb almost laughed. Almost. After dinner, Preacher stopped by with a duffel bag. Clothes, Preacher said. 3 brothers donated. We've got jeans, shirts, hoodies, socks, and, most importantly, new shoes. He pulled out a pair of sneakers, size 3, navy blue with white stripes. No holes, no broken soles. Caleb stared at them like they might disappear. Try them on, Preacher said gently. Caleb laced them slowly, carefully, like he was afraid to break something valuable. When he stood up and took a step, there was no slap step, just the normal sound of a shoe that fit. Preacher watched Caleb's face, then quietly picked up the old broken sneakers and set them by the door. We'll keep these, Preacher said, holding up the broken shoe, in case you ever want to remember how far you walked. On Monday, Doc drove Caleb to Hadley Creek Medical Center for a full evaluation. Dr. Shaw was waiting. She examined the old collarbone fracture and shook her head. This needed surgery 19 months ago. Now it's healed wrong. We can re-break and reset it, but that's a bigger procedure. More recovery time. Caleb's eyes went wide with fear. Or, Dr. Shaw continued gently, we can leave it as is. It's not causing you pain right now, and it won't limit your movement significantly. It's your choice. Caleb looked at Doc, then at Dr. Shaw. Can I decide later? Absolutely. The rest of the exam showed severe malnutrition, mild dehydration, and vitamin deficiencies that would require supplements for 6 months. But nothing that couldn't be healed with time, food, and safety. That afternoon, Preacher took Caleb to his first therapy appointment at the Evergreen Family Wellness Center. The therapist, Dr. Ellen Voss, specialized in childhood trauma. She didn't push. She didn't demand Caleb talk about what happened. She just sat with him and asked what he liked to do. I draw maps, Caleb said quietly. What kind of maps? Buildings, routes, places I've been. Dr. Voss slid a blank piece of paper and colored pencils across the table. Can you show me? Caleb drew the Sunoco station, the concrete barrier, the position of Ray's van, the route he'd walked to get there, 11 miles compressed into a careful sketch. This is beautiful work, Dr. Voss said. You have a gift for spatial memory. Caleb looked up, surprised. No one had ever called anything he did a gift before. "Really?" "Really," she said. "I'd like to see more of your maps next week, if you're willing to share." The trial happened fast. With federal charges involved and overwhelming evidence, Maddox's attorney advised him to take a plea deal. He refused. He wanted his day in court. He wanted to explain that these children were troubled and difficult, and that he'd done his best. The trial lasted 4 days. The jury heard Caleb's testimony, delivered in a quiet, steady voice that never wavered. They heard Patricia Hobbs describe the reports she'd filed and how they'd been buried. They heard Dr. Shaw present medical evidence showing a pattern of harm. They heard Earl Briggs explain how he'd seen children in Maddox's van who didn't look right, heard crying through closed windows, and said nothing because crossing the people who ran things meant losing his job. They heard signal-present financial records showing $487,200 siphoned from foster care funds over 3 years, plus $215,000 in insurance money from Caleb's parents, plus $163,000 from Liam Torres's policy. They heard the recording from the storage unit, Maddox's own voice discussing how to handle the Whitfield problem like they handled Torres. The jury deliberated for 1 hour and 53 minutes. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, Judge Torres didn't offer Maddox sympathy. "You were entrusted with the most vulnerable children in this state," she said. "You chose to harm them for profit. There is no rehabilitation for what you've done. There is only consequence." She sentenced him to 22 years in state prison. No eligibility for parole for 15. Denise Polk received 12 years for conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Judge Hammond was disbarred and charged separately. His son Bradley received 8 years. The courtroom was packed with brothers in leather vests. They didn't cheer when the sentence was read. They just stood, a silent wall of witness, making sure the system followed through this time. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in September, Caleb stood in the kitchen of the house on Maple Street and made oatmeal. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and honey, safe smells, comfort smells, the kind that meant no one was going to hurt him today. Ray sat at the table, listening. Water boiling, that sharp, bubbling sound that meant the pot was ready. Spoon stirring, slow circles, careful, the way Ray had taught him. Bowl clinking against the counter as Caleb measured brown sugar. "Ray?" Caleb said. "Yeah, kid?" "How do you know when it's the right thickness?" Ray tilted his head, listening to the sound of the spoon moving through the oats. "When the spoon slows down, when it takes effort to stir, that means it's thick enough. Try it." Caleb stirred. The spoon moved slower. "Like this?" "That's it. Now taste it, not too hot." Caleb blew on the spoon, tasted carefully. "It's good. Then it's ready." Caleb brought 2 bowls to the table and sat down. He was 59 pounds now, up 7 pounds in 6 months. Still thin, but no longer skeletal. His cheeks had color. His eyes didn't scan for exits quite as often. He wore a blue hoodie, new, his size, no holes, and navy sneakers on his feet. On his wrist was a simple watch that Signal had taught him to read, because Caleb liked knowing what time it was. Control over time felt like control over safety. "This is really good," Ray said after the first bite. Caleb smiled, a small, genuine smile. "You taught me." You learned, Ray said. There's a difference. Outside, morning light filtered through the kitchen window. Ray couldn't see it, but he could feel it. Warmth on his face. The promise of a safe day. Caleb ate slowly, savoring each bite. Not because he was afraid it would be taken away, because he finally understood that there would be more tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day after. Ray, Caleb said again. Yeah? Thank you, for teaching me things I want to learn, not just things I need to survive. Ray's hand found Caleb's across the table. That's what home is, kid. A place where you get to learn things just because they make you happy. After breakfast, Doc picked them up for Caleb's 6-month medical checkup. Dr. Shaw reviewed the charts and smiled. Vitamin levels are normal. Weight is trending upward. Kidney function is good. You're healing, Caleb. Caleb nodded, then asked the question he'd been holding for weeks. Can I play soccer at school? Dr. Shaw blinked, surprised. You want to play soccer? The other kids play at recess. I want to try. Yes, Dr. Shaw said gently. You can absolutely play soccer. That afternoon, Preacher drove Caleb to Hadley Creek Elementary and walked him into the principal's office to complete the enrollment paperwork. Caleb started school the following Monday. He was nervous. He counted the exits in every classroom, 2 in the main room, 1 window, 1 door to the hallway. But when the teacher, Mrs. Brennan, asked if anyone wanted to share something they were good at, Caleb raised his hand. I draw maps, he said quietly. What kind of maps? Mrs. Brennan asked. Places, routes. I can draw this school from memory if you want. She handed him a piece of paper. Show me. Caleb drew the school layout, hallways, classrooms, exits, office, cafeteria. Perfect proportions. Perfect spatial accuracy. The other students watched, fascinated. That's incredible, Mrs. Brennan said. How did you learn to do that? Caleb hesitated. I used to need to know where the exits were. Now I just, like making maps. Mrs. Brennan pinned his drawing on the board. This is beautiful work, Caleb. For the first time in 19 months, Caleb felt like he might belong somewhere. On Caleb's 10th birthday, October 23rd, Ray and 20 brothers threw a party at the fire hall in Hadley Creek. Not the kind of party where adults stand around drinking beer and ignoring the kid. The kind where the kid is the entire point. Cake sat on the table. Yellow cake with chocolate frosting. Caleb's favorite. Candles, 10 of them, waiting to be lit. Presents wrapped in paper that Caleb would get to tear open himself, not carefully unwrap because someone would yell if he made a mess. Signal gave him a camera, a real one, not a phone camera, with a note. For documenting things that matter to you, not just things that scare you. Doc gave him a first aid kit, fully stocked, with his name written on the case in permanent marker. The note inside read, For helping people, not just surviving them. Preacher gave him a library card with his name embossed on it in gold letters. Caleb James Whitfield, Reader. Any book you want, Preacher said. No limits, no permission needed. Just read. Iron gave him a leather jacket. Not a cut, not a vest with patches, just a jacket, with his initials stitched inside the collar. C.J.W. For when you ride with us, Iron said. Someday. When you're ready. And Ray gave him something small, a brass key on a chain. Caleb turned it over in his hands, confused. What's it for? Front door, Ray said quietly. So you always know you can come home. Caleb held it like it weighed more than brass should weigh, like it was the heaviest, most important thing he'd ever been given. "I'm not going anywhere," Caleb whispered. "I know," Ray said, his hand finding Caleb's shoulder with the ease of practiced familiarity. "But now you get to choose that. Every single day. That's what freedom is. Not staying because you're trapped. Staying because you want to." Later that night, after the cake was gone and the presents were opened and the brothers had headed home, Caleb sat on the couch with the brass key still around his neck. Ray sat beside him, white cane propped against the armrest. "Ray?" Caleb said. "Yeah, kid?" "Thank you. For everything." Ray's hand found Caleb's shoulder again. "You walked 11 miles to find me, Caleb. I just made a phone call. You're the one who saved yourself. I just made sure you didn't have to do it alone." Caleb leaned against Ray's side. For the first time in 19 months, he fell asleep without counting exits. Because he finally knew he was home. 2 weeks after his birthday, Signal pulled up to the house on his bike, a 1972 Harley Shovelhead that he'd rebuilt himself, painted deep blue with silver flames. "Ray said you wanted to learn," Signal called through the open window. Caleb was down the stairs in 10 seconds. Signal handed him a helmet, smaller than the ones the brothers wore, but still too big for Caleb's head. "First rule, respect the machine. It's not a toy. It's transportation. It's freedom. You treat it right, it'll take care of you." For the next hour, Signal taught Caleb how to sit, how to hold on without squeezing too tight, how to lean into turns with the rider, not against him. They didn't go fast. They didn't go far. Just around the block, 3 times, Caleb's arms wrapped around Signal's waist, the wind in his face, the rumble of the engine beneath him. It was the first time Caleb had felt the world rushing past him, and felt safe doing it. When they pulled back up to the house, Caleb was grinning. The first real, unguarded smile Ray had heard in his voice since the morning at the Sunoco. "That was amazing," Caleb said, breathless, helmet hair sticking up in all directions. Signal nodded, adjusting his sunglasses. 11 more years, kid. When you're 21, I'll teach you to ride your own. Until then, you ride with us." Caleb looked up at him. "Really?" "I don't say things I don't mean," Signal said. "When you're ready, we'll get you your own bike. Until then, anytime you want to ride, you call me." "Deal," Caleb said, and for the first time since his parents died, he was planning for a future he wanted to live in, not just surviving a present he feared. In Hadley Creek, consequences became permanent and measurable. The state audited every foster placement in the county. 12 additional cases of financial fraud were uncovered. 17 children were moved to safer homes. CPS implemented mandatory rotation of case managers. No one person controls access to a child's file anymore. Family Court instituted third-party reviews for all cases involving foster care placement or guardianship transfers, and the brothers started something they called the Angel Watch program. Chapters across West Virginia now coordinate with child advocates to provide visible presence at court hearings, placement reviews, and emergency interventions. Not as vigilantes, as witnesses, making sure the system knows someone is paying attention. In the first year, the program intervened in 43 cases. Not all of them involved criminal harm, but all of them involved children who needed someone to see them. 1 year after that terrible morning at the Sunoco, Ray and Caleb stood in the same parking lot where it had all begun. The fog rolled off the river. The sun was just starting to clear the ridge. The temperature was 39 degrees. Ray sat on the same concrete barrier, white cane across his knees, thermos of coffee in his hands. Caleb stood beside him, wearing a winter coat that fit and boots with intact soles. No more slap step. Just steady, even footfalls. The sound of a kid who didn't have to count exits anymore. "You know what today is?" Ray asked. 1 year, Caleb said. 1 year since you walked 11 miles in the dark to find help. Caleb was quiet for a moment. "I was so scared." "I know. But I did it anyway." "You did," Ray said. "And that's the thing I want you to remember. Not that you were scared. That you were scared and you kept walking." Caleb watched a truck pull into the lot. A family got out. Mom, Dad, 2 kids. Normal people doing normal things. The kind of normal Caleb was finally starting to understand. "Ray?" Caleb said. "Yeah? Do you think I'll always count exits?" Ray thought about this. Maybe. Maybe not. Trauma changes us. But it doesn't have to define us. You're not the scared kid who counted exits to survive anymore. You're the kid who counts exits because you're good at spatial awareness. You're the kid who makes maps because you love geography, not because you're planning escape routes. How do you know the difference? Because now you have a choice, Ray said. And choice is everything. Inside the Sunoco, Earl Briggs stood behind the counter and watched through the window as the blind man and the boy sat together in the early morning light. Earl had given testimony at Maddox's trial. He'd told the truth about what he'd seen and what he'd failed to do. He'd lost sleep over it. He'd apologized to Caleb directly, and Caleb had said, "Thank you for finally speaking up." Not forgiveness, not absolution, just acknowledgement. Earl couldn't undo the past, but he'd made a promise to himself. Never again. He now kept copies of everything. He reported anything that felt wrong. He'd become the kind of witness the system needed, because that's the thing about silence. It only works when people choose it. And Earl had chosen differently now. Here's what I need you to understand if you've stayed with this story. This isn't really about motorcycles or leather vests or 250 men rolling into a small town. It's about a system that was designed to protect children and instead became a machine that profited from their silence. It's about witnesses who saw the truth and looked away because looking away felt safer than speaking up. It's about a child who had no power, no resources, no voice, and who walked 11 miles in the dark anyway because survival demanded it. And it's about a man who couldn't see and a boy who couldn't be seen, and how they found each other when every other door had closed. You don't need a motorcycle to be a protector. You don't need perfect vision to see what's wrong. You need the courage to stop counting exits and start opening doors for the people who are trapped behind them. Because here's the truth that Hadley Creek learned the hard way. Evil doesn't need elaborate plans. It just needs silence. Victor Maddox didn't run a criminal empire. He ran 3 group homes in a county where people had been trained to mind their own business. Denise Polk didn't mastermind a conspiracy. She just filed reports in a drawer and counted her monthly payments. Judge Hammond didn't orchestrate corruption. He just signed papers without reading them and protected his son's paycheck. The machine ran on silence. And it ran for years because good people convinced themselves that someone else would handle it. But here's the other truth. It only took one person refusing to stay silent to break the entire machine. Caleb walked 11 miles. Ray made 1 phone call. And everything changed. Not because they had power, but because they had courage. And because 250 men decided that being visible mattered more than being comfortable. If you've ever seen something wrong and looked away because you were tired, This isn't here to shame you. It's here to wake you up. Because there are Calebs everywhere, in your county, in your town, in the apartment next door, or the classroom down the hall. There are children counting exits because exits mean survival. There are systems designed to protect them that have been corrupted into systems that profit from their pain. And there are witnesses, good, decent, exhausted people, who see the signs and convince themselves that someone else will handle it. You don't need 250 motorcycles to change a story like this. But you do need eyes willing to see. You do need a voice willing to ask uncomfortable questions. You do need the courage to be the person who doesn't look away. Pay attention when a child flinches. Listen when they hesitate. Notice when bruises don't match explanations. Ask the hard questions even when your voice shakes. And if you're the one who sees something, if you're the teacher, the neighbor, the nurse, the clerk behind the counter, file the report. Make the call. Document what you see. And if the first person doesn't listen, find someone who will. Because the difference between a child who survives and a child who doesn't is often just one person who refused to be silent. Ray still lives in the house on Maple Street. His VA benefits are current. He's gained 15 pounds. He volunteers at the Veterans Center twice a week, helping newly blind veterans navigate the systems he had to learn alone. Caleb is 11 now. He's in 6th grade. He plays soccer and draws maps, and sometimes has nightmares, but he has Dr. Voss to talk to when that happens. He has Ray's steady voice reminding him that he's safe. He has brothers who check in, who remember his birthday, who show up when he needs them. Last month, Caleb asked Ray if he could join the school geography club. "Of course," Ray said. "Why are you asking permission?" "Because I want to learn how to map places I've never been," Caleb said. "Places I might go someday, not just places I need to escape." Ray's hand found Caleb's shoulder, the gesture so familiar now it didn't need explanation. "That sounds like freedom," Ray said quietly. "And maybe that's the real ending of this story. Not justice, though justice mattered. Not revenge, because revenge would have been empty. But freedom. Freedom to walk without counting exits. Freedom to sleep without listening for footsteps. Freedom to be a child who draws maps of places he wants to visit instead of routes he might need to run." If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs a reminder that one person's courage can break an entire system of silence. And in the comments, tell me, where are you watching from? And if you've ever been the person who saw something wrong and finally spoke up, or if you're the person who wishes you had, tell your story, because your voice matters. And silence only wins when we let it. And remember, you don't need a vest to be that protector. You don't need perfect vision to see what's wrong. You just need the courage to stop looking away. Because sometimes the difference between a child surviving and a child thriving is one person choosing to make one phone call. And sometimes it starts with the smallest, bravest question in the world. Are you the man who rode with the angels?